Okay, Reddit, get ready for a story about family drama, favoritism, and how my life took a sharp turn from princess to pariah. It all started with the fact that I, Amelia, 28 years old, was the miracle baby my parents had been trying for what felt like an eternity. They'd practically built a shrine to my first ultrasound picture, and I was showered with love and attention from the moment I was born. But then, plot twist. Along came my twin brother, Alex, the unexpected and, let's be honest, unwanted addition to the family. Suddenly, I wasn't the sole focus of their attention anymore. And let me tell you, my parents weren't exactly subtle about their preference. Growing up, it was Amelia this, Amelia that. I got new clothes, fancy toys, and endless praise. My room was a carefully curated haven of frills and pink, while Alex's was a haphazard collection of hand-me-downs and forgotten toys. It wasn't that my parents were outright cruel to him. They just didn't really see him. He was always kind of an outsider, quiet, kept to himself, never really fitting into the whole happy family charade they were so desperate to project. I remember one Christmas, I must have been around 8 or 9, I received this elaborate dollhouse, a 3-story Victorian mansion complete with tiny furniture and a working doorbell. Alex got a set of used Legos, most of the pieces missing. I remember him looking at my dollhouse with this mixture of longing and resentment in his eyes, and I felt a pang of guilt, even then. But the guilt was quickly overshadowed by the thrill of being the favorite. I basked in the glow of my parents' adoration, reveling in the special treatment, the extra privileges, the unwavering support. I was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And to be fair, I played the part well. I was the good kid, the one who got good grades, followed the rules, and never caused any trouble. I excelled in school, joined the cheerleading squad, and had a seemingly endless circle of friends. I was the social butterfly, the life of the party, the one everyone wanted to be around. Alex, on the other hand, was always marching to the beat of his own drum, doing his own thing, never really caring what anyone else thought. He was the artistic type, always sketching in his notebook, building weird contraptions in the garage, disappearing for hours on end to explore the woods behind our house. He was a mystery, even to me, his twin. We were polar opposites, and the tension between us was always simmering just below the surface. He resented the attention I got, and I resented his aloofness, his refusal to play the role of the adoring younger brother. We fought constantly, bickering over everything from toys to TV channels to who got the last slice of pizza. Our parents, of course, always took my side. "Amelia's just trying to be helpful," they'd say. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" It was like they were constantly comparing us, holding me up as the shining example of what a good child should be, while Alex was relegated to the role of perpetual disappointment. Looking back, I can see how damaging that must have been for him. To grow up feeling like you're constantly being measured against an impossible standard. To feel like you're never good enough, never worthy of the same love and acceptance that your sibling receives so effortlessly. But back then, I was too wrapped up in my own world, my own teenage dramas, to really see the pain I was causing. I was the princess, and he was the peasant, and that's just how it was. Or so I thought. Little did I know that the dynamics of our family were about to be shaken to their core, and that my actions would have consequences that would ripple through our lives for years to come. The seeds of resentment, sown in the fertile ground of parental favoritism, were about to bear bitter fruit, and I would be the one left to harvest the consequences. The tension between Ethan and me simmered beneath the surface of our seemingly normal family life. He was quiet, withdrawn, always disappearing into his room with a book or spending hours sketching in his notebook. I, on the other hand, was the social butterfly, the cheerleader, the one who thrived on attention and affection. Maybe it was the twin thing, the constant comparisons, the inherent competition for our parents' love. Or maybe it was just our personalities, like oil and water, destined to never quite mix. Whatever the reason, the distance between us grew. I'd try to engage him in conversation, invite him to join my friends and me at the mall, or suggest we watch a movie together. But he'd always decline, his eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and sadness that I couldn't quite decipher. I didn't understand him. Why couldn't he just be normal? Why couldn't he appreciate the life we had, the love our parents showered upon us. Didn't he see how lucky we were? Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I was too demanding, too needy, too focused on my own needs. But I was the older twin, the one they had longed for, the one who had brought joy into their lives after years of trying. Wasn't I entitled to a little extra attention? And then, the unthinkable happened. At 16, I found myself pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't entirely unexpected either. Mark, my boyfriend, was the star quarterback, the most popular guy in school. We were young, reckless, and hopelessly in love. My parents, though initially shocked and disappointed, quickly rallied around me. They arranged for a hasty wedding, a small ceremony in our backyard with only close family and friends. They promised to support us, to help us raise our child, to make sure we had everything we needed. But their support came with a price. With a growing family and limited space in our modest 3-bedroom house, a decision had to be made. And that decision, as it turned out, involved Ethan. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, my parents sat Ethan and me down in the living room. The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. My father, his voice heavy with emotion, explained that they had decided to ask Ethan to move out. "We love you both equally," he said, his eyes darting between us. "But with the baby coming, we need the extra space. It's not fair to you, Sarah, to have to share your room with your brother." I looked at Ethan, expecting an outburst, a protest, a display of the anger and resentment that had simmered beneath the surface for years. But he just sat there, his face pale, his eyes downcast. He nodded silently, his voice caught in his throat. I felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of empathy for the brother I had often dismissed and misunderstood, but it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming reality of my own situation. I was pregnant, scared, and desperately clinging to the support of my parents. I couldn't afford to worry about Ethan's feelings, his needs. My own world was imploding, and I needed all the help I could get. The next day, Ethan packed his bags. He moved in with our aunt, a woman who had always shown him kindness and understanding, a safe haven from the turmoil of our family. He left without a fuss, without a word of protest, without a backward glance. And just like that, he was gone. Out of my life, out of our house, out of our family. The rift between us, once a hairline fracture, had become a gaping chasm, a void that seemed impossible to bridge. I tried to tell myself that it was for the best, that he would be happier living with our aunt, that he would finally have the space and freedom he craved. But deep down, I knew that I had played a part in his departure, that my own selfishness had contributed to his exile, and the guilt, like a persistent shadow, followed me into my new life as a wife and mother. Life as a teenage wife and mother was like being trapped in a washing machine set on the highest spin cycle. The days were a relentless blur of diapers, sleepless nights, and a constant feeling of being in over my head. The scent of baby powder and sour milk permanently permeated the air, a constant reminder of the never-ending cycle of feeding, changing, and comforting 3 demanding infants. Mark, my husband, the high school football hero who had swept me off my feet with his charm and promises of forever, quickly grew restless under the weight of responsibility. The reality of diapers, crying babies, and a demanding wife clashed with his carefree party boy persona. He started staying out late, his excuses flimsy, the scent of cheap perfume clinging to his clothes like a telltale sign of his infidelity. I tried to be the perfect wife, the doting mother, the supportive partner. I cooked, I cleaned, I nurtured, I sacrificed. But the weight of responsibility was crushing, a heavy burden that threatened to buckle my young shoulders. 3 babies, all demanding attention at the same time, turned our cramped house into a cacophony of cries and a battlefield of spilled food and discarded toys. The constant sleep deprivation left me feeling like a zombie, my brain foggy, my emotions frayed. My dreams of college, of a career, of exploring the world and discovering my own identity were replaced by the endless cycle of feeding, changing, and comforting. My social life dwindled to hurried conversations with other young mothers at the park, our exchanges punctuated by the screams of our demanding offspring. My days were a blur of exhaustion and frustration, my nights a symphony of lullabies and whispered prayers for a few precious hours of sleep. My parents, bless their hearts, tried to help. They took turns babysitting, bringing over casseroles, and offering words of encouragement. But their support, though appreciated, couldn't fill the void in my life, the yearning for something more than the confines of motherhood. I felt like a bird trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by love and support, yet longing for the freedom to spread my wings and soar. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more chaotic, the news came. I was pregnant again. This time, it wasn't a surprise, but it wasn't exactly planned either. Birth control, with 3 babies to juggle, and a husband who seemed more interested in escaping reality than participating in it, wasn't exactly at the top of my priority list. The thought of another baby, another mouth to feed, another body to clothe, filled me with a sense of dread that bordered on panic. Our small house, already bursting at the seams with 3 toddlers and their ever-growing collection of toys, felt like it was about to implode. The financial strain was relentless, Mark's sporadic income as a construction worker barely covering the bills. We were constantly juggling payments, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and relying on my parents' generosity to keep our heads above water. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of responsibility. I needed help. I needed space. I needed a lifeline. And then, a thought struck me, a desperate solution to a desperate situation. Ethan. He had been living with our aunt for the past few years, building a life of his own, away from the chaos and drama of our family. I hadn't seen him much, our relationship strained by the circumstances of his departure and my own preoccupation with motherhood. But I knew he had done well for himself. He had a stable job as a graphic designer, a nice apartment in a trendy part of town, a life that seemed worlds away from my own chaotic existence. A plan began to form in my mind, a risky gambit born of desperation. I would reach out to Ethan, appeal to his sense of family, ask for his help. Surely he wouldn't turn his back on his own sister, his own flesh and blood. Surely he would understand the impossible situation I was in and offer a helping hand. I called him, my voice trembling with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious, hesitant, as if he were bracing himself for bad news. I took a deep breath and launched into my carefully rehearsed speech, painting a picture of our dire circumstances, the cramped house, the growing family, the desperate need for more space. Ethan, I pleaded, my voice cracking with emotion, we need your help. We need a place to stay, just for a while, until we can figure things out. We're family, and we need you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, a silence that stretched into an eternity, filled with the unspoken weight of years of resentment and neglect. And then, his voice, cold and distant, shattered my hopes. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said, but I can't help you. I have my own life now, my own space. I can't go back to that. The rejection stung, a sharp slap in the face that brought tears to my eyes. I had expected resistance, perhaps some hesitation, but not an outright refusal. Didn't he understand? Didn't he care? I tried to reason with him, to appeal to his sense of family obligation, but he remained firm. He had moved on, built a life for himself, a life that didn't include the chaos and drama of our family. He had found peace and stability, and he wasn't willing to risk it for us, for me. I hung up the phone, my heart heavy with disappointment and a growing sense of resentment. How could he be so cold, so uncaring? Didn't he realize that I was drowning, that I needed a lifeline? But even as I wallowed in self-pity, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, a voice that reminded me of the years of neglect, the unspoken resentments, the distance that had grown between us. A voice that whispered, you reap what you sow. Years passed. I navigated the choppy waters of teenage motherhood, juggling diapers, schoolwork, and the occasional bout of teenage angst. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I had my own little family, a roof over our heads, thanks to my parents, and a husband who, while not exactly Prince Charming, was trying his best. But life in that cramped house was starting to feel like a pressure cooker. 3 kids, 2 adults, and my increasingly frail parents, all crammed into a space meant for a small family. The walls seemed to close in on me, the constant noise and chaos a never-ending assault on my senses. I longed for space, for privacy, for a moment to just breathe. Then came the news that sent my carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. I was pregnant again. Panic clawed at my throat. Another baby? In this tiny house? How were we going to cope? My husband, bless his soul, was more concerned about the cost of diapers than the lack of square footage. My parents, while overjoyed at the prospect of another grandchild, were increasingly reliant on me for their own care. I felt trapped, suffocating under the weight of responsibility. That's when I remembered Alex, my estranged brother, the one who had disappeared from our lives all those years ago. I hadn't heard from him in years, but a few months back, I'd overheard my mom talking to a distant relative about how Alex had bought a house. A big house, with plenty of space. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan that, in retrospect, was probably fueled more by desperation than logic. I convinced my husband that we should reach out to Alex, that we should ask him if we could stay with him for a while, just until we could figure things out, find a bigger place. He won't say yes, my husband grumbled, even the pessimist. He hasn't spoken to us in years. He's family, I countered, clinging to that thread of obligation. He can't just turn us away. Deep down, I knew it was a long shot, but I was desperate, grasping at straws. We packed up the kids, piled into our beat-up minivan, and set off on the pilgrimage to Alex's house. It was a long drive, filled with a mixture of apprehension and a strange sense of hope. Maybe this was the chance to mend fences, to rebuild the bridge that had been broken so long ago. When we arrived at Alex's house, my jaw dropped. It was a beautiful craftsman-style bungalow with a wide porch, a sprawling lawn, and a detached garage that was bigger than our entire house. A wave of resentment washed over me. How could he, the unwanted twin, the forgotten son, have achieved so much while I was struggling to keep my head above water? We knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Alex answered, his face etched with surprise and a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. He looked older, more mature, with a quiet confidence that I hadn't seen in the awkward teenager who had left our home all those years ago. I launched into my rehearsed speech, explaining our situation, emphasizing our need for temporary housing, appealing to his sense of familial duty. But as I spoke, I could see the shutters coming down on his face, his expression hardening, his eyes growing distant. "Amelia," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I understand your situation, but I can't help you. This is my home, my space, and I'm not comfortable with the idea of you and your family moving in." The rejection stung, a sharp slap of reality. I had expected resistance, but not outright refusal. I had counted on his guilt, his sense of obligation to sway him, but he was unmoved, his boundaries firmly in place. My husband, never one to mince words, stepped forward, his frustration evident in his voice. "Come on, Alex, don't be like that. We're family. We need your help." Alex shook his head, his jaw clenched. "I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not the kid you pushed around and ignored anymore. I've built a life for myself, and I'm not going to let you disrupt it." The conversation quickly devolved into an argument, voices raised, accusations flying. I felt a surge of anger, a sense of injustice that burned in my gut. How could he be so cold, so heartless? Didn't he understand that we were desperate? In the heat of the moment, fueled by a mix of desperation and entitlement, I made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. I pushed past Alex, stormed into his house, and declared that we were staying, whether he liked it or not. My husband, caught up in the moment, followed suit, ushering the bewildered children through the door. Alex, his face contorted with rage, tried to push us back, but we were too many, too determined. A scuffle ensued, furniture overturned, voices escalating, and then the sirens. The neighbors, alarmed by the commotion, had called the police. Within minutes, our family drama had spilled out onto the front lawn, a spectacle for all to see. The police officers, stern and unsympathetic, separated us, taking statements, assessing the situation. I tried to explain, to justify our actions, but my words fell on deaf ears. Alex, his voice shaking with anger, accused us of trespassing, of assault, of disrupting his peaceful existence. The officers, seeing the state of the house, the clear evidence of a struggle, sided with Alex. We were arrested, charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct, and escorted out of the house in handcuffs, our children crying, our faces burning with shame. As we sat in the back of the police car, the reality of our situation hit me like a ton of bricks. I had crossed a line, violated a boundary, and in doing so, I had not only alienated my brother further, but also exposed my family to public humiliation and legal repercussions. My desperate attempt to secure a roof over our heads had backfired spectacularly, leaving me feeling more lost and alone than ever before. The rejection stung, a sharp slap in the face that left me reeling. How could Ethan, my own flesh and blood, turn his back on me in my time of need? Didn't he understand the impossible situation I was in? Didn't he care about his nieces and nephews, his own blood relatives? Anger quickly replaced the initial hurt, a fiery rage that fueled my next reckless decision. I convinced myself that Ethan was being selfish, that he had forgotten the meaning of family. He had a big house, plenty of space, and more than enough money to help us out. Why was he hoarding it all for himself? Driven by a mixture of desperation and entitlement, I hatched a plan. Mark, ever the passive participant in our family drama, went along with it, more out of a desire to avoid conflict than any real conviction. We packed up the kids, loaded the car, and drove to Ethan's house, a sprawling ranch-style home in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and defiance. When Ethan answered, his face etched with surprise and a hint of apprehension, I pushed past him, the kids trailing behind me like a gaggle of confused ducklings. "We're moving in," I declared, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "We need a place to stay, and this is our family home too." Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sarah, what are you doing? You can't just barge in here like this." "Oh, can't I?" I retorted, my voice rising. "We're family. You can't turn your back on us when we need you most." A heated argument ensued, our voices echoing through the house, the kids looking on with wide, frightened eyes. Ethan pleaded with us to leave, to respect his privacy, to understand that he had built a life for himself, a life that didn't include the chaos and drama of our family. But I was deaf to his pleas, blinded by my own needs, and fueled by a sense of injustice. I had sacrificed everything for my family, and now, when I needed help, my own brother was turning me away. It wasn't fair. The situation escalated quickly. Mark, sensing the tension, tried to intervene, but his efforts only fueled the flames. Ethan, pushed to his limit, called the police. The arrival of the officers brought a chilling halt to the chaos. They separated us, took statements, and assessed the situation with a calm detachment that only served to heighten my shame. I tried to explain, to justify my actions, but my words sounded hollow even to my own ears. The officers, their faces etched with a mixture of pity and disapproval, issued us a warning for trespassing and escorted us off the property. I stood on the sidewalk, my children clinging to my legs, tears streaming down my face, as I watched Ethan close the door, his expression a mixture of sadness and relief. The drive home was filled with a suffocating silence. Mark, his face pale and drawn, kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The kids, exhausted and confused, had fallen asleep in the back seat, their innocent faces a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I felt like a complete failure. Not only had I failed to secure a place for my family, but I had also alienated my brother, perhaps irrevocably. The shame of being escorted off his property by the police, the humiliation of having my desperation exposed to the world, burned in my gut like a hot coal. As I tucked my children into bed that night, their soft snores a comforting counterpoint to the chaos of the day, I couldn't help but wonder where I had gone wrong. How had I reached this point, this desperate, lonely place where my own family had become strangers? The answer, I knew, lay somewhere within me, in the tangled web of my own insecurities, my misplaced sense of entitlement, and my inability to see beyond my own needs. I had a lot of work to do, a lot of bridges to rebuild, and a lot of apologies to make. But in that moment, all I could feel was the crushing weight of my mistakes, the bitter taste of defeat, and the fear that I had lost my brother forever. The aftermath of the disastrous home invasion at Alex's house was a brutal awakening. The arrest, the charges, the public humiliation, it all crashed down on me like a tidal wave, washing away any remaining illusions I had about my place in the world, my relationship with my family, and my own sense of self. As I sat in the back of the police car, my children crying beside me, my husband fuming with anger and embarrassment, I felt a profound sense of shame. Shame for my actions, shame for the spectacle we had created, shame for the pain I had caused, not just to Alex, but to my own family. The legal repercussions were swift and harsh. We were charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct, fined a hefty sum, and ordered to stay away from Alex and his property. The incident made the local news, our faces plastered across the screen, our family drama laid bare for all to see. The judgment, the whispers, the sideways glances, it was a constant reminder of my mistakes. A scarlet letter branding me as the villain in this family saga. But the legal consequences were nothing compared to the emotional fallout. Emily, already distant, completely cut ties with me. My parents, though heartbroken, couldn't condone my actions. They blamed me for the estrangement from Alex, for the public humiliation, for the disruption to their peaceful retirement. And Alex, well, he was gone, completely and utterly gone. He wouldn't answer my calls, wouldn't respond to my letters, wouldn't even acknowledge my existence. The brother I had once known, the one I had shared a womb with, the one I had pushed away and taken for granted, was now a stranger, a ghost, haunting the periphery of my life. The weight of my isolation was crushing. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of regret, the waves of guilt and shame crashing over me, threatening to pull me under. I had sacrificed everything for my family, my education, my career, my dreams, all put on hold to raise my children. And yet, here I was, feeling more alone than ever. Nights were the worst. After the kids were finally asleep, the silence of the house would amplify the echoes of my mistakes. I'd lie awake, replaying every conversation, every decision, every misstep that had led me to this point. The what-ifs and if-onlys tormented me, a relentless chorus of self-recrimination. If only I had been a better sister to Alex. If only I had appreciated his presence in my life. If only I had acknowledged the pain I had caused him. If only I had recognized his need for independence and respect. The realization that my actions had not only hurt Alex but also damaged my relationships with my parents and sister filled me with a profound sense of loss. I had always craved their approval, their love, their acceptance, but I had pushed them away, driven them away with my selfishness and my inability to see beyond my own needs. But amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. I realized that I couldn't change the past, but I could learn from it. I could use this experience as an opportunity for growth, for self-discovery, for forging a new path forward. I started small, focusing on the things I could control. I made a conscious effort to be more present with my children, to appreciate the joy and laughter they brought into my life. I started taking them on adventures, exploring new parks, and creating memories that weren't overshadowed by my own internal struggles. We baked cookies together, built pillow forts, and had impromptu dance parties in the living room. Their laughter became a lifeline, a reminder of the unconditional love that still surrounded me. I also began to reconnect with old friends, the ones who had known me before the weight of motherhood and family drama had consumed me. We met for coffee, went for walks, and had long overdue conversations about life, love, and everything in between. Their support and understanding were a balm to my wounded soul. They reminded me of who I was at my core, separate from the roles of mother, sister, and daughter. And I started exploring my own needs and desires, the parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of expectations and responsibilities. I signed up for a pottery class, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. The feel of the cool clay in my hands, the process of molding and shaping it into something beautiful, was both therapeutic and empowering. It was a way to reconnect with my creativity, to express myself in a way that had nothing to do with my family or my perceived failures. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The sharp edges of my guilt and resentment softened, replaced by a quiet determination to do better, to be better. It was a journey of self-discovery, of shedding old patterns and embracing new possibilities. I started setting boundaries, saying no more often, and prioritizing my own well-being without feeling guilty. I wrote a long letter to Alex, pouring out my heart, acknowledging my mistakes, and expressing my deep regret for the pain I had caused. I didn't expect a response, but I needed to say those words, to offer a sincere apology, even if it was never received. To my surprise, a few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Alex. His words were cautious, measured, but there was a glimmer of forgiveness in his tone. He acknowledged the pain of the past, but also expressed a willingness to move forward, to rebuild our relationship, albeit slowly and carefully. Tears streamed down my face as I read his letter, a wave of relief and gratitude washing over me. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start, a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. My relationship with my parents also began to mend. They saw the effort I was making, the changes I was implementing, and their trust in me slowly returned. We started having honest conversations, sharing our feelings and perspectives, rebuilding the foundation of our family on a bedrock of honesty and mutual respect. The road ahead was still long, but I no longer felt lost. I had a compass to guide me, a compass powered by self-reflection, honesty, and a deep commitment to personal growth. I had stumbled, I had fallen, but I had risen stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a life filled with love, connection, and authenticity. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of our family story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with understanding, forgiveness, and a deeper appreciation for the bonds that tie us together. A chapter where I wasn't defined by my mistakes, but by my resilience, my growth, and my unwavering commitment to becoming the best version of myself.